Well, then let's dive into another lecture here. We're going to do how to draw anime hair today, everybody. Uh, if nobody knows who I am still Brosatsu. I will be your lecturer today, forever and always, because that's the only one who lectures here. So, without any further ado, let's dive into it. Anime hair. So, we got a little setup here for you. We got the heads all ready to go. Before I start drawing, let's kind of preface what the secret to anime hair is. So, real hair itself, let me open a little page here for you so you can see what I'm going to talk about. So, the human head is covered in like a million little tiny strands of carbon that we call hair, right? You know, just a single thing. And when you sit down to draw hair, you could, if you really wanted to, try and draw every single strand of hair, but that is incredibly tedious and nobody wants to do that. And honestly, when people do it, it looks kind of bad. So what do? Well, you start to think of hair in clumps, like little groups, right? So instead of just drawing every one of the like 100,000 strands of little carbon fibers on your head, you instead think of it in groups, right? And when you draw hair, the decision you have to make is how big are you going to make these groups, right? Are you going to do little thin strands, big, large sections, somewhere in between? And so that is the kind of underlying decision you have to constantly make when you draw hair. Because if you do like, this clump here, here's a simple clump. I could leave it just like that. Or if I wanted to, I could put a little strand here, maybe do a little break here, do a little line here, and, I don't know, maybe like it comes in a bit, right? I don't like that. Yeah, right? You can start to sort of play with it a little bit. Maybe there's a piece that comes under like that. And so this is this is the sort of underlying theme today of anime hair. It's what we're going to cover. First, I'm going to cover the sort of basic components of what is anime hair. Then I'm going to go into looking at real human beings and how you sort of pull from real life. And then we're going to go into a little more depth on the two ideas I just mentioned of sections and clumping and how to like really add like the detail to your clump. So there's the basics of it. Let's dive into what is a section. So let's start with just the goils. So we'll turn you and you off. Boop, boop. Right. When you're doing anime hair, there are what I call 3 to 4 sections, quote unquote. When I mean a section, you can break down almost every head of anime hair into 3 to 4 major areas. And I say 3 to 4 because one of them you could argue is the same piece, maybe not, right? And what are those pieces? Those pieces are, one, the front of the head, or the bangs, you might call them. And let's go with red, right? So that would be this section here, right? This is the bangs, the front, right? Let's turn that head down so we can see these sections. Right, we'll keep that nice and simple. I'm not going to get too into detail. We'll do that later. Then next, you have the sideburns, and I should have put one over here too. So, right, you can put the bang. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And that's kind of where the front would be. Oh. We don't need it really, just a little guideline here, right? I'm already getting too precious. Sideburns, let's do blue. And the sideburns are these sections, right? These are very, very stylistic for anime, especially the women. Men, you only really get them on long hair. And they can go in all kinds of sizes. I'll have some examples for you later where you can see how you can play with these sections. Right now, we're just going over the basics of what your pieces are. And now we're 3/4. I'm going to do 3 and 4 because I think it's more useful in the long run. Is you have the top of the head and the back of the head. And let's add the little colors here so we can see, right? This is our front. These are our sideburns. We'll do green for the top and purple for the back. Right? This is actually, got to put this somewhere else. We're running out of space here. Let's put that over here. Right? So the top of the head, right up here. Maybe she's got a little fun curl thing going on, right? That's kind of up here. And then the back of the head, right? Our little notes are in the way. So those are our major sections, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and easy. Let's bring out our boys so we can see that over here. Here. We'll get rid of this. It's a mess. It's a mess in here. I'm going to actually let's move our head so we can see how they look together. See, look, now he's got long, beautiful hair. Sephiroth. Right? You can see on a guy's face. But let's say we don't want, you know, big, long, beautiful hair on our fellow, so let's modify that a bit. Let's say he doesn't have this hair curl thing. Okay, bye, bye, bye. And he doesn't have this long, flowing hair. He doesn't have these big, silly sideburns. He's going to go to school and get a good job, and he needs a nice haircut for that, right? Exactly. So, let's say we got some nice, neat sideburns. They just kind of come, not even, just little short ones, right? But you can probably see how there's like a formula to anime hair in that there's 3 to 4 major sections. And this is like a little pretty guy head, so he's got a nice short haircut, right? But at the same time, we can also doll him up a little. Okay, so now we understand, now and forever, the basic sections of anime hair. Let's look at what a real human head is like. Right, so here's an examples for you. I tried to find some really universal ones. And while we do this, let me just copy over our sections. Let's take this one. Let's just have the little note for us on the side as we sort of break this down, right? So let's start with our first model. And feel free to try and guess along with me as I break down where the sections are. Going and just shouting at the screen, it's the front, Satsu, the front, right? Like we're doing Dora the Explorer or something. So the front here would be right here, right? See this? And don't worry about when you're breaking things down, like getting super complicated about the shapes. You just want to think about the basics because we're going to get into how you actually get fancy with your clumping, right? Because I was trying to think of a good word for it before I did the lecture, like these sections. All I could think of was clumping. Maybe not the best, but I think it gets the point across. Because again, like if you look like a real person's hair, right? You can see if you look real close, like there's a million billion little strands all over the place, right? Right? You can just stare at this with your big fancy eyes and tear apart all the detail and like, look at all these hairs. But if you draw every hair on her head, and this gets you into a composition thing, is you're going to pull the attention away from your focal point. Like when you draw a face, generally, that's your focal point, right? And I'm going on a bit of a tangent about composition, but it's important for hair because when you draw hair, you have to decide how much detail you're going to put into the hair. Right? How many strands are you going to show? How many strands are you not going to show? Like, for instance, I'm kind of a lazy artist, and when I draw hair, I don't really like to do a lot of breaking apart stuff. I know how to do it, but I like to just kind of draw hair as sort of a block and move on, because I don't have the patience to detail every strand of hair, even though that's really important for anime. Anyway, so composition tangent aside, back to our sections here. Right, we'll turn her back down. Your sideburns. You don't really see the sideburns here because she has this sort of part around her face, but the sideburns would be kind of in behind the ear. Don't worry about it. I have an example for that. So here's the top of the head, right? And then you can see how 3 and 4 kind of blend together because you have this sort of merge, right? And those are the major sections of this head. I'm sure all of you are nodding along right now. I love it. Let's move into an example that's a little more developed because this is the simple one to get our brains humming and thinking, right? Exactly. So let's try this this lovely little fella here who has a little more robust locks. Right, so where's the front? Right here. Look at that. Look at that, see that? Here's the front of his hair, and it's doing that kind of cool thing where it's sort of, you can see the bottom of it, which is why I picked this example, because you can get that example of it. You can see there's these different sections, right? There's the front of his head. That a little lighter. How about his sideburns? And this is where I want to sort of point out that the sideburns, like in anime, right? These big long things that are on the side of the head are actually not as prominent in real human pictures. Like they're there, but anime being a cartoon kind of exaggerates them to a large degree. Like, well, I have some examples I'll show you later for anime characters where, like, for instance, 02 has very, very long, quote-unquote, sideburns, and it's just kind of a stylistic thing where they usually have, like, it really, really sets apart a lot of anime artists who kind of know what they're doing and those who don't, is the use of these sideburns, because it's anime is really just eyes and hair, because there's so little detail on the nose or the mouth, so those are things you got to play with, and so we really work those sideburns, don't we? Back to our buddy here. You could probably argue maybe like this is his sideburn, right? Maybe like a little bit. There's not much on him. But the top of his head, well, right here we got that beautiful little side part going on. And you can see the clumping starts to happen, right? These sections, which we will get into. Don't get too impatient. Okay, a little bit at a time, right? And then the back of his head, right? And I feel I should make this even more obvious, and I'm going to color these in for you. Because that's what I like to do for you guys, right? So, yeah, let's color this in. And I'm going to keep drawing here, but if this is all making sense, give me a yes in that chat there. I'm going to try not to spend too much time waiting for yeses, because people want to review this later. I want lots of nodding, lots of like, wow, Satsu, I never thought about that before. I am now a hair master. It's all clicking. Excellent. Love seeing those yeses. Okay. So, you're right. So here's our major sections. Major sections. And color it in, because I think this should make a little more sense of the whole thing. We don't got to get pretty or precious. We just need to sort of get the basics out, right? You can see here actually how the back of his head wraps around his neck a little bit, so that's kind of fun. That's why I picked this one. So you see that? Simple, easy, straightforward. How about, bam, this one. I thought this would be a little harder to process because her hair's kind of curly. So let's get into it. So, how would Dora do it? Hola, niños. Donde es... Oh, shit, I don't know Spanish. It's like, donde es la bangs or something. I don't know why I'm trying to speak Spanish. This is an art tutorial. I don't speak Spanish. Anyways, so we'll just all ignore that. Let's do the front here. Front. And you can see here how it gets a little light. Here's where you get to make a decision as an artist. Are you going to just block this whole thing out, or are you going to maybe make some little flourishes here, right? You know, What do you want to do? You can see here how the sections are kind of starting to happen. Again, I don't want to get too ahead, but you can see how you can sort of maybe make a section here, and a section here, and a section here. Don't worry about it too much. We will get into it. It's all connected. I'm so sorry. So, right. I just want to get used to the idea of the sections, because I think once you understand sections, anime hair becomes really easy to decipher and put together, because you make your character head and you just, boom, what do the bangs look like? Boom. What's the sideburns look like? Back, top, you're done, right? And then it comes into, like, how do you want to modify these? Right, so there's the front of her hair. And let's just rip through this, because I think we're getting itchy for the next section, right? You could argue that this is her sideburn, right? Curling up and in, right? You can make an argument for that. Those are her sideburns. And then the top of her head, right here, it's got that cool sort of, see the space here? You can illustrate that. You'll learn over time as you do more hair how you like to decorate it all. Right? Call that a front, blah, blah, blah. Let's call this the back. And she's got nice swoopy hair. Right? So let's color it in. I like to color it again, so let's do that again. I thought that was really lit. Really lit, fam. Whatever the kids say. Really Sigma. Here we go. Here we go. It's all beautiful. It's all coming together. It's all connected. We're all one, right? Yeah. Don't get too precious. We want to go on to the next part and draw some anime hair, right? Who cares about these stupid humans? Jeez, just so needy, so complicated. Why do I want to draw characters? He says, I should just get into drawing rocks. Wait, rocks are kind of complicated too. The natural world is not conducive to having a good time as an artist, is it? Why is it all so complicated? Why do I feel the need to draw it? I don't know. Could have been an electrician or something, you know? Well, actually, electricity is kind of complicated too, isn't it? Jeez, there's just no winning. Well, guess we'll just keep drawing people. Block it in, whatever. Up, don't get precious, don't get precious. Oop. Boom. Okay, there's the general sections. So now we've kind of looked at regular human hair. Hopefully you have some idea how to look at a human head and go, okay, those are the big sections. Let's get into the fun stuff. Let's draw some anime. Right? That's what we want. We want anime. I'm not here to learn how to draw human hair. I'm here to draw anime hair, right? Unfortunately, anime is based on humans, so I had to take a little detour there, and I know somebody mentioned that they want to look at that. So let's dive into sections. Let's start with Goyles. Right, here we got 02 and Miss Scarlet from the lovely and incredibly entertaining Fairy Tail, which all true connoisseurs of anime know is the superior version of One Piece. I will fight people. No, it's okay. You're allowed to like both. So here's where we start to explore the idea of clumping in a little more detail. And sections. Let's use the word sections for the 4 major areas of the hair, and the word clumping for where you decide to break up the hair. So let's start with 02 here. And all I'm going to do is start with the sections. So we got the first one here, right? We have the front of her head. Right? Which does this. Do, 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 do. And then we got the sideburns, and you can see here how, like I mentioned, sideburns are really big on anime. Look at that. These are huge, big, monstrous sideburns, right? Let's not do the clumping just yet. I'll just show the areas real quick. Right? We can't see the top of her head. We're going to fill it in anyway. It's there somewhere. And then here's the back, right? So here's where I'm going to start talking about the idea of adding detail in between your hair. So let's zoom in here and look at some of these lines. See these 2 lines here? Oop, don't fight me. Don't fight me, Photoshop. I am your master, and you will listen to me. Okay, so see these 2 things here? These 2 lines by themselves, if I just draw them over here, mean nothing. But there's this interesting phenomenon with the human eye, where if you just imply something in the right area, the viewer will do the rest of the work for you. What do I mean by that? Well, I think a really good example of that is, let's say I were to draw this shape right here, right? Okay, what is it, like a river, a tube or something? Well, what if I did this? What if I added these little sort of flecks to it? All of a sudden, your brain starts to go, hey, wait a minute. Are those scales? Right? You can kind of see it, can't you? Like, that looks like scales. Well, okay, we'll put the snake head on it. Right? And he's a happy snake. He loves you. He would never bite you. But these, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of little shapes like that suddenly do this wonderful thing in our head of communicating to a viewer that this snake is covered in scales without having to draw like all 5 million scales that's on a snake's skin, right? Well, we're doing that same kind of psychological manipulation of our viewers, but with hair. So, and I'll leave that snake there for reference because I think that's really important to look at that snake. I'm going to actually name it Snake. I'm going to name the layer Important Snake. There we go. So no one forgets that he's loved and he has people out here who care about him. But back to the point of the hair and choosing the lines and the sections. Let's see. I was doing the back. Let's move. So we have one here, right? In here. And you can start to think of this, and I'm going to just sort of make a new one here. Let's erase these, and let me show you what's kind of happening. So here's, let's put those back. Let's put those back. I got ahead of myself. So we have these lines here, but what you can think is happening is there's these invisible sections of hair clumping, right? Where like you draw these sections, right? You sort of imagine there's these collections of hair. Remember at the beginning where I mentioned there's like you have, 1 or a million individual strands of hair, but you have to sort of decide how big you're going to make the sections. This was what I was alluding to, is when you start to draw anime hair, you have to decide where the sections are. And I have some anime characters who are just where like that's the whole point, is like making an infinite number of sections of hair. 02 happens to be one of those characters that's a very lazy version of this, right? So even if you go to like the front of her head here, you can imagine, you see these little lines, right? There's a line there, there's a line there, there's a line there. Well, you can imagine that there's sections, right? And this is important when, I'll do this in the next lecture. I'm not going to cover it this one. We're going to get how to color and render anime hair. These sections are going to be your bread and butter, right? Because like, for instance, if I wanted to render this hair a little bit, right, you would light along these sections, right? Like that. See what I mean? That's what these sections do. That's how you know where do I put the light along these sections, right? So that's the whole point of sections. So let's just look at the lines here, right? You can see there's a... Oh, I see. I've used the wrong color. This is technically the bottom and back of the hair, and I used green, which means I am stupid. Don't tell the other students, please. We want everyone to think I'm very, very smart, right? So here's the sections. You can see here, actually, as we turn the layer up, there's some shade here, which is part of this section idea, right? And, well, actually, it looks at, see, here's some shade here, here's some shade here, and this goes to that part, or that point I was talking about, of using this sort of imaginary sense of sections. Sorry, clumping, I changed my words, oh my goodness. To help render your figure later. So like here is, for instance, a clump, and here is a clump. And so then here is the shade of, let's call this clump A, right? And we'll draw a bunch of A's in here, right? A, and then here is B. Well, here's some, I can't fit B's on there, but you get the idea, right? And so that's how this whole clumping idea works. And so if I was to, like, for instance, let's, you know, turn her off entirely, and let's just get rid of all this noise I put in here, right? All this noise, and I'll show you what I mean when it comes to this idea of, right? Or just get rid of all of this. Bum, 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 bum. Let's grab her, let's get her face real quick. Right, let's just get the line of her face, whatever, whatever. Binku. Right? If I'm doing this, and I have my rough face here with my 4 sections, I could, you know, just sort of draw some things in. Whatever. I could give her bangs, I could not give her bangs, it doesn't matter. I could do a little line here, right? I could do maybe a line here, right? Just kind of following the flow of the head, make some stuff up. And that's kind of how you draw hair, right? You just kind of pick some spaces, and then you decide how much detail am I going to give this, right? If I go to the front of the hair again, you can, you know, really just kind of keep adding in lines and adding sections, right? You can, like, do the style where it comes up to the top of the head like this, right? Where they kind of have that sort of little peak in the middle here, right? You can just keep adding detail. Straight? That's starting to click? Am I starting to get some, yeah, right? Let me see some yeses in the chat, because I know you're getting it. You're smart people. You're not stupid. Right? So, I would say stage 2 from 0 to 1 step up. Miss Scarlet here. You can see how there are some more robust clumping ideas going on, right? And you can see, using them big old pretty eyes of yours, that these sections are being used to determine where to, and let's make this, erasing her, but you can see, and let's go just hard black and white, how these clumps are being used to determine where the light goes. So you see, like, here is a clump, right? Well, we know using that clump, put some light there, right? Here's another one here, put some light there, put some light there. All these pieces of light and dark detail are being determined by where the clumps are, right? Here's a clump here. You can see there's the light. Here's a clump here. Here's the light, right? And same thing, like, I like this one right here, actually. Do blue, right? You can see, like, on this section, right? We have that light right there, and we have this dark on the clump, right? And I should be using red for the front, but unfortunately, Erza has red hair, so that makes this not as easy, right? Same thing here, right? Like, here's another great example. Look at this. There's a big clump, clumpy, clumpy, clump, clump, right? And we have our light already lit up, but here's some black, right? Look at that. And that's essentially the logic of anime hair, is you take these big, simple blocks, right? And let's, just for the sake of consistency, show our blocks, right? So let's move this over for convenience. Let's do the front of the hair. She's got there. Actually, that would be the, right? So here's the front, comes out a little, right? There it is, right? There's the front of the hair. Boop, 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 boop. Sideburns. See, look at these big sideburns. I told you anime loved big, dumb sideburns, even though by itself it's, like, kind of excessive. Like, imagine if humans had these big noodles hanging just over their ears. But remember, anime is a cartoon. It is not real life. Goku is not real. Which I struggle with every day. Right, so those are our major sections. You see here, Erza, pardon, has this a very common anime trait of the ear poking out behind the sideburn. That's why the sideburns are so identifiable in anime, is because this is a very, 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 very common artistic choice. Now, you don't have to show that ear. You could easily just, I could just erase your ear entirely, and You know, just color that in, and look at that, your ear's gone, right? But as you watch your anime, I think even 02 has it. Yeah, see, the ear poking out's a real big anime trope. Her ear is actually in the wrong spot for the human head, but we won't get into that because it's a cartoon. It's not real. No one's taking it that seriously. I am, though, because I'm here to teach you guys how to do this. So let's look at some boys. Now you can see here, like, where are their sideburns? Ah, they're men. They're clean. They're organized. They're here to do their taxes, right? So let's look at our boys. Start with old Ackerman, right? Now, hopefully by now you're starting to get some light bulbs here for these sections, how they all work. Yeah, not the taxes. Well, I just did taxes. Government grumble, grumble, grumble. Right. So, and here we see a really, let's call it an anime trope. This like little, I don't know. Someone in the chat tell me what I'm going to call this. It's like this little thing where it kind of, you get like your, I don't know, your Backstreet Boy ramen bowls. Sure, your ramen bowls. But you get this sort of formation, and it's over here on Forger over here, where you can see it sort of comes up from, like, you know, here's our head. Got a big nose. It starts here, like the forehead, and it kind of comes up and does this sort of thing, and then you've got this, like, I don't know, makes me think of the Backstreet Boys for some reason. Right? But you can see what happens. It's like, oh, like a McDonald's arch. There we go. We're calling the arches. But you can see it's in both our characters here, and you'll note that it's actually quite common in anime characters. Once you spot it, it's all over the place. Right? But this is a very exaggerated version. We don't actually want to draw it like that because it looks kind of crap. Here, let's put our exaggerated ugly face over here. There we go. In the corner. We don't want to look at it, but we need to remember that it exists, right? So we're just going to have it somewhere awkward but ignorable. Anyways, back to the front of his face. You can see how there's lots of very small clumps on Levi's head, right? Like if you look at all these, see all these little tiny details of light? That's the hints of clumps, right? Look at all this. Every single one of these is kind of hinting at a small section of strands. Maybe there's only 100 strands here. Maybe there's just 50 here. Maybe there's 1,000 here. But you're just putting in enough information to tell the viewer that Levi has nice, fine, well-conditioned hair. We all know he takes care of his hair, right? We see how much he cleans. It only makes sense he would, like, you know, really look after his hair. You know, you heard it here first. It's canon. Right? And because Levi doesn't have too much hair, the front of his head is, you know, it's not super detailed. You'll notice that guy characters tend to have incredibly simple hair compared to the female characters, which is fair. Here's his sideburn. It's barely there. You can see a little bit of it over here, but not really. Right, top of his head, it's got that part. And this is because on human heads, the hair tends to part along the middle of the scalp. Not always, but that's just kind of how gravity is doing its thing, right? Because gravity is pulling down around the head. So you often have these kinds of parts. And you can see it's over here on our other guy too. There's that sort of midline part where the hair is kind of going over there and going over there, right? Kind of looks like antenna or something, what I've just drawn. But we don't need this over here. We don't need this. Let's get rid of this. Nothing happened. Perfect. Okay. The sideburns, right, top of the head, we're still doing that one. And then you can see here how, I know I kind of said it's like a 3 or a 4 because it's like, well, is this the top or the back of the head? Like, there's not much information going on there, but for the sake of giving us options, we're gonna do it like that. So, see that? There's the sections of our head. So, I want you to shout at the screen once again as I do this. Where's the front? You can see it. There it is. It's plain as day. There's the front of his head, right? There's the section of the front of his head. That should be up top there. Where's the sideburn? Oh, there's a little one right there. Right? You can't even see it over here. There's no sideburn. Oh, that's a not a good question mark, right? There's no sideburn. Where's the sideburn? Someone call Batman, because I can't find it. As far as our arches here, you can see that you don't have a hard line to delineate it, because that would look kind of weird to just put like a really hard line. So usually you can see here the color. When you're doing the color, illustrates it. If you're just doing line art, like if you're not doing color, you just do these little kind of marks, usually enough, right? Just like that kind of implies it. It gets the idea across. Remember, you only want to use as many lines as you need to communicate to viewers what's happening. As esoteric as that sounds, the day it makes sense is the day art makes sense to you. So work on it, okay? Cool. All right. So here's once again another top of our head. And we're getting the point, I suspect. So let's just rush through this because I think we're getting it, right? And I picked this one because you can see here how in this section here, or right there, you can see how the top of the hair is actually arguably separate from the back of the hair, because you can see a little itty bitty section right here, right? You see that? You see that? So on this character, the top hair, the top piece, because I guess he has some kind of fun bowl cut, is actually overlapping what would be the quote unquote back of the hair. You could just as easily, if you wanted to, you know, just as easily if you wanted to, you know, you could play with it and decide he doesn't have this, and now he's got big shaggy hair, right? He's got a mullet. I made myself laugh. He's got this big, gross Billy from Stranger Things mullet, and he likes to rock. Okay, I'm out. Let's move on. I'm having too much fun. Here, you know what? Let's give Levi as a mullet too, right? Okay. Hopefully you guys find that funny too, or this is going to be very, very awkward in the references. Moving on, I have an example here of two of anime's hottest redheads, Yoko and Rias, to show this point of how much clumping do you want to get into, right? And I think this is a really good illustration to get this point across, right? Because you can see here over, if you're not familiar with the characters, right? Just so if you're not familiar with characters, I'm going to say their names. This is Yoko from Gurren Lagann, and over here, this is Rias from what is it? High School DxD or whatever it's called. I don't remember the specifics. And I know the character's name is Rias. I haven't actually watched the anime. I just know of the character because everyone is really into her for some reason, and maybe if I watched the anime, I would know why too. But I suspect there's two reasons why everyone likes the anime. Anyway. Getting into sections. So let's start with just our two here. We'll make Yoko a little bigger, so it's about the same size as Rias. To show this difference in making clumping decisions, right? As we decide how much hair are we going to show our viewers. And I now realize red is a horrible idea for the front. So for this one, the front is going to be black because we got red heads, and so the red's going to get lost, right? So if we go to Yoko here on the left, here's the front of her hair, right? And you can see the artist made a decision to do very, very little clumping, right? It's not really even shown. It's just kind of the outline of the hair, and I'm not really seeing the details. And Yoko is a fun character in that her front of hair really ends up being a huge part of her head, like this section. I'm sure if we find like a 3/4 version, would be almost like she's wearing like a little bit of a mask, because you can see here on the character in the back, as we grab, I think we were doing green for the top. Yes, we were. You can see the top of her hair right here, right? So the front is very prominent, and Blue for the sideburns. You can see here's her sideburns, right? There they are. You can't see the one on the left because her bangs are covering, and here's the back, right? Look at that. And you can see it. This one, right? Take a look at the character with it all turned up, that there's very, very little shown in the way of these kinds of clumping sections. You can see here, there's a light one here, right? There's a little bit shown through shadow here, but for the most part, in this style of hair, we don't really get into the clumping, but that's going to change really soon because we're going to go look at Rias over here, and you can see Rias is a minefield of clumping. The kind of thing I'm sure a lot of you, and myself included at one point, have had nightmares about, like, how do you do this, right? But don't worry, I'm sure at this point it's a little demystified. You can see here that Rias has those shade light guidelines I was talking about, right? You can see if I draw out these sections, you can see, and well, actually what I'll do to illustrate the point is I draw on all these clumps, because you can look at all these clumps, so many of them. I don't even want to count them, there's so many. Ridiculous. And a little tip for you when you're drawing these is they don't, because I know there was an ask about contour for the face. So when you're doing these kinds of clumps, you usually want to hug the face, but you don't have to, because hair can be kind of random. If you wanted to, if you want to draw these, you could just kind of like draw in your general areas, but you can kind of make things up because hair does random stuff. And then with these, these lines I've drawn in, you can then sketch in where a clump should go. So there's a clump. I'll even turn off Rias to show you my point, right? You can just kind of draw around these lines that you made, right? Maybe that makes you go, oh, okay. Maybe that's your little aha moment where you're like, I can just sort of draw in these random lines for how the hair should flow and then just draw clumps around it, right? Like if I go over here and I just sort of put in some random lines for how the hair is flowing, we'll erase these down, make it nice and light. Then I'm just going to go in and, okay, here's a clump. Here's a clump. Oh, this one kind of comes across. There's a clump. Clump, right? Maybe does that help anybody? I guess in the chat if that's making some sense for one way to break this crazy anime hair thing apart. Right? Yeah, so exactly. You could do this in these big blocks, right? Your 4 major sections, and then sort of add your flow lines. Like if we go over to Yoko here, and let's say we want to give her the Grimori treatment, or Grim, I don't know how you say her name. I've only read it. Again, I haven't watched the anime. I just know the character has really crazy hair clumps. So we could go over to Yoko here. And what if we were to put in these lines, right? Let's do these really light, right? Line, line, line. Do it on a new layer too, so I keep it clean, right? Put in these lines of how the hair is flowing. Let's turn Yoko off. And let's actually add these in. So here's a section, right? Here's a more developed section. Oop. We got a line here. Let's break it up, right? Here's a more developed section. We got one going down the middle here. So let's do something like this. Maybe it comes out a bit, right? They're starting to click. Go, oh, look at that, right? You just kind of break up the lines. Use your brain. Think about how could the hair sort of fit together, right? And you just sort of add more detail as you want to. And that's kind of the long and short of it, huh? Not too bad, right? Look at that. Now, Yoko's got crazier hair. Nice, fluffy, wacky hair. And all we did was we used our brains and we thought about how to play with it a little bit, right? And that's really how this hair thing works, is make your big blocks, and then you just keep kind of adding detail to it until you're happy with where you think it should be. Right? And it's the same thing with like these back parts, right? You just add in more lines, more flows, let it all come in, right? There's a line of shade, right? Oh, here's some shade here, and you just keep rendering it, right? But always, always, always start with the big blocks. That will make this so much easier. And that was the one thing I really wanted to get across to people when they're doing this, is just thinking 4 major sections: the front and or bangs, the top, the back, the sideburns. Because if you follow those main sections, when you look at an anime character, which is why, like, here we have this simple Yoko, which I brought along for the ride for just that purpose. You can look at her and go like, okay, oh, there's the front, right? Easy, easy, easy. I am drawing Yoko. I can draw her forever because now I know where the front of her hair is, right? See, there it is. That's the front. Where's the sideburns? Oh, right here. Obviously, look at that. Right? And I don't know what it's a ponytail kind of as a top or a back. I guess it's both, so I don't know. We'll just have to, I'll just use green. We'll just say it's right. There it is. And you can see your ponytails like they just decided it was one big clump, and so there's a shade and a light section. Anyways, do I need to go into the detail of all the clumps of Rias over here, or are we getting the idea? Let me see something in the chat. I'm going to keep drawing until I see somebody say something. But I suspect we're starting to get the idea. I suspect that it's all starting to go, okay. It's not that complicated, right? It's not that complicated. Right? Starting to see some, oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, you're going to draw some sick anime here after this, right? So actually, that's a great point mentioning curls. What I want to do for our last little section was dive into some general hair shapes. And I put, here we have 2 characters kind of get this idea across. Now, in anime, there tends to be a flatness to the hair. So when we do like real IRL human stuff, human hair tends to work in cylindrical formations, right? Like, you know, like a cylinder. It's okay. I should have done that better. But like if I were to, you know, actually, let's just do this right. Grab a soft brush, do it proper, right? Human hair tends to work in a kind of cylindrical fashion, right? But anime, not so much. Anime tends to be more of a fettuccine. Yeah, right? So it tends to do, I call this flagging, because it resembles how a flag works. Like I think all of you were here for the clothing masterclass. I mentioned how clothing and fabric has this kind of flagging behavior where it tends to buckle in on itself. Well, anime hair tends to follow this kind of logic, almost like thin sheets of cloth. At least when it gets into the detailed wind sort of aspects, you don't really see this too much. It's kind of hinted at. Like, for instance, over here on 02's hair, you can kind of see they went for a sort of cone sort of shape. But over here, you can see this is mostly very flat looking, right? This is flat and flat. I'm not going to write fettuccine, but flat. And here it's kind of a cone thing. So then back to this idea of flagging, as I've decided to call it. How it works when you draw these hair details is you just making this kind of too big here. I can do it right here. I'll do it here. So you draw your line, right? But then you draw another line, you can kind of crisscross it. And on some sections, you do the shade like this. Other sections, you leave light. And that's what you can see is happening over here on 02 is, get our brush. You can see it does one line. Oh, here, let's a new layer because I'm drawing over all the other details, right? We do one here. Here's our one line, but hey, we're gonna cross it right there and come back up, right? And you can see there's another one here. Line comes back, cross comes back, right? And you can do this with all of our hair, really. You could do one here, right? And that's one way to kind of do the sense of like curls and twirls and all kinds of variations to the hair. And lost track of what I was talking about for a second. My brain just fell through the earth. I was talking about hair details, how to turn your clumps up, essentially, right? So 02 has a very simple version of this, where, like, for instance, you draw, and I suppose this is a sideburn, so let's keep our colors consistent. All right. Like, look at this section. You could just kind of draw this as a tube first, right? Just a little, or a fettuccine, right? Boom, boom. But then you go in to spice it up. Well, what do we got here? We got a little, comes off a little bit, see? See that? She's got the very, very simple version. Right, let's see. I want to spot another one. You can look here, right? Look at this one here. This is back of hair. I don't really know. It's in the wind. In the wind, it makes no sense. So you have your hair, right? Oop. And they've decided to like put a line here. And 02 is a very, very simple version of this. So let's go over to Forger here to kind of get into the idea of making things more complicated. So I'm going to call this a sideburn. So we'll grab our blue. Here is the general shape of it, right? But now you start adding more stuff to it. We can see that there's a little piece that comes off, like its own separate piece of hair. And you could do it just like that. Or you could add that twisty thing I was talking about, right? You can twist it, right? And let's follow this a little closer. Or we're gonna, hitting the wrong buttons, hitting the wrong buttons. You can see right here is a very common anime flare where you have your line of hair, but you add this like little extra bit inside there. This little bit is see-through, there's no light. You can make this section thick or really thin. In this case, the artist made it very thin. So, you know, we're gonna come up. There's another one right here actually, right? You see that there? The detail's a little light here. Same thing on the side of the hair. Here's her sideburns, right? Here's the general shape. But let's turn her up so we can see the detail. You can see that we take our general shape, but we're gonna add a little flare here, right? And it comes down. Another flare here, right? And we just keep adding stuff to it. And you can add as much as you want. You'll notice that there's all these strands of hair, because that's one way to sort of zazz up your hair, right? You like add some random strands onto it. His hair is loose. And so you just, when you add these strands, one or two, don't go crazy. It's just to kind of go, oh, okay, it's hair, it's everywhere, it's a mess, right? Because if you start doing all of the hairs, it's going to take all the attention away from where your focal point is, whether it's an action or a face or a scene. Remember, hair is not, unless the hair is the focal point, right? So with these two characters here and the variations of hair, let's call it flourishes in your head. Let's just wrap this up with some basic guidelines on these sections. So you tend to have, and we kind of talked about this in the sort of like, you know, you add your lines and then you build around them. You have hair that kind of hangs straight, which will, you know, it comes down. And you might do this. If you want to spice it up, you just kind of add some extra stuff onto it, right? Maybe, boom, boom, right? You just sort of add some stuff to it. You put one of those lines I talked about in there, right? Maybe one right, I don't know, here. Little break in the hair. Maybe the hairs aren't quite even at the bottom, right? They come across, and you just kind of add some little zazz to the hair. Maybe a couple lines, right? That's how you spice up hair. And you can do this, of course, with every clump on the head. Like you could go to old Rios there. That's not good. And you could decide that you want to zazz up every one of the clumps on her head like this, right? If we go back to her, we go to Rios over here. And I can decide on like this clump, I want to just add lots and lots of stuff going on. See that? You can just do this forever, forever, forever. And every time you render into like a sub clump, you have to remember that that will then be affected by light, which we'll get into in the next lecture, either next week or the week after. We'll figure out the flow of things, depends on how many questions we got. Same thing with like, you know, this one we're doing here is you can just keep adding. and adding 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 until you've just, done the entire head of hair, right? I'm sure you're kind of starting to see the process here. You start with your big blocks and then just keep chopping it up until you're happy. That's really all it is, right? And every time you chop it up, just remember that's kind of a new sort of sub-strand. So that should get the idea across of straight hair. What about a little bit of wave to it, right? You can put a little bit of a skitty thing going on, right? So all this is you take this one and you put some spice on it, right? So we'll do our general shape. It's the same thing. You pick some spots and add some spice to it, right? All it is. You can even like do clumps that come across, right? That are sort of like building off of it. Like you imagine in 3D space, right? You can also do it where, and I'm just kind of giving you the variations now where you're like, well, what do I want to do with it? You can do the ones where maybe it comes across like that. And now this is a shaded spot, right? There's just so many options. You can do ones where it kind of comes across and this goes under, and you just keep spicing it up. So you're like, that's cool. I'm happy with this, right? Maybe that comes across and you just keep spicing and spicing and spicing. So you're just like having a great time and your hair is so pretty and you're like, I wish my hair looked like this, but you're like, I look silly, right? See that? Look at that. Just all clicking. I'll give you some yeses in the chat. You're like, okay, this makes total sense now. The next time I draw a hair, it's going to be like bang, bang, bang. Beautiful bangs. Right? And to wrap it up, finishing line. We're coming in after a successful trip for a landing. Let's talk about curls. It's really the same thing. So curls have this pattern kind of like, and let's do our little symbol there. Right, as our curl. Oop, no, draw the arrow. Okay, so curls follow this pattern of you have a top section, like these they kind of run like Fritos, I guess, and they just kind of get thinner and thinner until it's over. And let's do the back here. Is they loop around. What's happening is you're getting this. It's in behind here, right? You're kind of like this. What's happening is this is connecting in behind, right? 'Cause you're getting like this, here's the base. The base is doing this, right? You just imply these back parts. And the same thing is with the rest of our hair, and we'll turn off the purple, so we'll go full black, is you draw on your block, your general shape, and then you just spice it up, right? Maybe you put a hair here. Maybe you put a hair here. Right? Put a hole here. And that's all it kind of is, right? Just block, spice. Block it, spice. That's how hair works. Right? And the only thing stopping you is, well, how much spice you want to put on this, right? I wouldn't go too crazy with these, unless you really want to, because it's just going to turn into a rendering nightmare. Because if you do a whole head in these things, like, you're doing some, I don't know, can't think of anyone with really curly hair, Little Orphan Annie or something, it's going to take you a long time to render. If you're into that, Godspeed, have fun. Just a little word of warning is that this stuff takes forever. But with that, I think we've covered all the basics of anime hair. Are there any questions? Simple ones. Or no, just any questions. Oh. Okay. So let's end the lecture there. I suspect the next lecture, I'm going to be getting into how to actually add color, shade, and light and rendering to anime hair, because now we got the lines, we got to add in the spice level 2, right? Because we got our little sort of, our little mini spices here, but what's the point without color, right? Nobody wants to live in color. That's why we invented color with The Wizard of Oz, right? Okay, with that, that's the end of this lecture. I'm going to end it here. I'll see you in the next one. Happy drawing, boys and girls.